In this video, we're talking about how you shoot epic B-roll. Actually, what we're doing is talking about 20 practical tips to help you shoot better B-roll so that you can tell a compelling story. These things are fun to play with too, though. So today's video is sponsored by Soundstripe because you can have the best looking footage in the world, but once you add music to it, it creates a completely different feeling to your footage. So we'll talk about music a little bit later in this video. But what I wanted to talk about was practical tips that are gonna help you shoot better B-roll to tell a story, because you can have the cool, fancy, stylish B-roll, but if it doesn't enhance what it is that you're creating, then there's really no point to shoot this style of B-roll. So recently I've been working on a VR project, and it took me all the way to Thailand. And I brought my buddy Levi Allen along with me to help shoot behind the scenes and B-roll. Now, if you haven't seen the first video in this series, I talk about this entire project. And in that video, you're gonna see different B-roll from tons of different shoots that I did. So the first video really sets up what that project is all about. And in that video, I'm using B-roll from all these different places where I was shooting this VR content. And most of the time when we're out shooting and doing these behind the scenes pieces, we're not carrying all this gear with us to create these fancy B-roll sequences. We're just using the gear that we have accessible so that we can capture what we need to tell the story. All right, so let's talk about B-roll and some practical things that you need to think about when you're shooting. And if you're new here to this channel, my name is Jevin Dovey. I do a lot of filmmaking tutorials. I like to go on adventures and capture the moment. And I also do some YouTube training. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on those bell notifications so you don't miss one of these videos. So tip number one is shoot at high frame rates. So I always am shooting at 4K 60 on my GH5. And the reason for that is when you're shooting B-roll, you might want to have real-time footage, but there's also a lot of times where you might catch something and you want to be able to slow it down. So this is why I still shoot with the GH5 and I haven't switched to one of these full frame cameras, because on the GH5, there's no crop at 4K 60. So I can shoot all my footage in this format, get 4K, and still be able to slow it down later. Now, you don't have to shoot 4K. I just personally like that, so you need to shoot at what resolution makes sense for you. On the Nikon Z6, you can shoot high frame rate, 120 frames per second, and still record audio, so that's an awesome advantage. GH5, you can't do that. So on cameras where you're using variable frame rate, you have to think about actually using slow-mo in specific sequences rather than capturing audio and high frame rate and then be able to make the choice in edit later. So for me, I just shoot 4K 60 for the majority of my footage and then use high frame rate for those moments where I really want to have that buttery slow motion. So tip number two is less gear is better. So you don't want to have like a backpack full of like GoPros and 360 cameras and gimbals and drones and, you know, every kind of attachment, every lens, every prime that you could imagine. Because the issue is when you have all of this gear, you're going to end up using none of it. A lot of times when we're out shooting, we'll use like the camera with the lens that we have on it to capture the good B-roll, and then like halfway through the day make a switch, or for something specific grab a piece of gear that we might need. Like my backpack is pretty stripped down, and for me, I've learned that if I bring a ton of stuff with me, I end up using almost none of it. So be really thoughtful with the gear that you decide to bring and make sure that it's stuff that you're actually going to use when you're out shooting. Now, don't be afraid to shoot. I think one of the things that plagues us as creators is this feeling that like everyone's looking at us and they're going to judge you for what you're doing, or they might stop you. The way you're going to get better B-roll is by just taking the camera out and just going for it. If you do something where, yeah, someone tells you to stop, then just stop. There's no reason to be afraid to shoot. And for me, this has been one of those things that's plagued me in the past where I've just kept the camera in my backpack. I haven't pulled it out to shoot the shot, but every time that I've overcome that kind of fear of just pulling the camera out in a public place or just in a situation where it doesn't necessarily feel completely right, I always end up getting some of the best B-roll, and it ends up leading to other kinds of shots that you would never think you would have gotten. For those of you who have been subscribers for a while, I'm getting there with my studio. I've been working on the ceiling, trying to black it out. You can see over there how I haven't done it yet. It's a work in progress, but it's really cool just to have a space where I can come to and just shoot and create whatever I want. And yeah, it's my little sanctuary. So another tip is that you don't have to shoot on manual all the time. So yes, there are times and places to learn how to shoot manual settings on your camera, but honestly, a lot of the times I'm shooting aperture priority or shutter priority just because I want to make sure that everything is exposed as good as it possibly can be, and I don't want to be sitting there fumbling with my settings. So the reason that you would shoot aperture priority is so that you can lock in your aperture if you want that shallow depth of field. And the reason that you'd use shutter priority is so that you can always get the proper motion blur out of your footage. And so a lot of the times I'm actually using one of these two modes unless I'm trying to get something very specific and I have time to set up a shot. Look, if you don't have access to your camera, you're gonna end up not using it. So for me, I use a Shimoda backpack that has a side open so I can just swing the bag around, pull my camera out. Now, when I was in Thailand with Levi, he actually has a camera mount right here on his chest, so the camera was always there to be able to pick up and just grab shots. Now, I personally might start doing that, but what I've been doing is just hand holding the camera. I always just have it out in my hand. So find a way to keep your camera easily accessible so that you don't end up missing the shot. Here's an interesting tip that works for your B-roll, but also your A-roll. So imagine that your mom is watching, and how would she react to what you're creating? So is she gonna be like, honey, that's pretty, but I don't really understand what you're doing? Like this lens, it's really fun to play with, but if it's not helping tell your story or enhance what you're doing or actually be clear in any way, then what's the point of using it? Like, I can get really fun shots of fur on stuffed animals, but what's that gonna do for this video? Nothing. You gotta think through how someone is going to be viewing your video and like what they're going to be getting out of the footage that they're seeing on screen. Now, this video is on practical ways to capture B-roll, but I do wanna pause the video right here and just talk about music for a minute, because music is going to really help your videos. So you can go out and get some amazing B-roll footage, but if you don't have the right music to pair with it, then you're gonna completely miss the moment to be able to capture the attention of your viewers and really pull an emotional quality out of the footage. So for me, I've been using Soundstripe for all of my music lately, and in my VR films, it is like the driving force to be able to make the films have this emotional impact. And when you're creating your videos, you need to make sure that you're properly licensing your music. So Soundstripe is a service where you can download anything off of their website and use it for any of your videos. And that's super powerful because you don't have to worry about copyright issues, and it just makes the whole process super easy. Now for me, for when I'm shooting my B-roll, I always jump on a Soundstripe and I go through and just try to find the perfect track that matches the emotional quality of what I'm trying to get out of the footage. And when you pair the both together, it's like magic. The music helps create that feeling that you're trying to capture with the footage, and it all works together. So guys, I highly suggest you check out Soundstripe. They have an awesome library and it's super easy to use. You can go through right now and actually just start listening to all the tracks and really get a sense for what kind of music is out there and available for you to download right now to put in your videos. All right guys, let's get on to the next tip. One huge tip is to lock in your white balance, because you don't want to have your colors fluctuating from shot to shot. When you get into color grading, it's going to be a huge pain to try and color correct everything back to normal. It's easier to just have one color that you have to apply to all of the clips. So if you lock in your white balance, put it on the sunny, put it on the cloudy, put it on the tungsten, whatever settings you have in your camera, put it on the one that's gonna make the most sense for the scene that you're shooting, and keep it there throughout the entirety of that scene that you're shooting. Because if you have to correct your footage because there was a little bit of color imbalance, you can do it across all the clips rather than having to go shot by shot by shot by shot. So use small, lightweight tripods. You don't always need to be carrying like a heavy video tripod with you everywhere you go. I've brought big heavy tripods on a lot of my shoots and I end up never actually pulling it out, or it just becomes dead weight. What I've found is that using these smaller, like just photo little lightweight tripods help you just stabilize your camera if you just need like a static shot. So getting a lightweight tripod that's very easy to bring with you is the way to go. So avoid shooting all of your B-roll at eye level. So if you're always just holding the camera up at your face and shooting kind of that same perspective, your B-roll is gonna look really bad. Think of ways to get the camera up high, go down low, go like way off in the distance, get really up close, because what creates interesting B-roll that people wanna watch is variety. So you wanna make sure that you're not shooting the same shot all the time. One thing that's really helped me get better B-roll is just have another creator around. Not only is that person going to be able to help you get B-roll of yourself, because a lot of times that's one of the hardest things to do, but also it's just someone to be a soundboard. You can bounce ideas off each other and you end up getting more creative because you guys have this back and forth where you can try things and actually just work with another creator. There's a lot of power when you are working around like-minded individuals. So make sure you get enough coverage that when you get in the edit, you're not missing elements. So make sure you set up what it is that you're shooting. Don't just go in and get like the main B-roll shots that you think that you need, but actually like set it up. So if you're at a new location, get some wide establishing shots. What's going to set up what this footage is that you're shooting? And the same thing when you leave or you're ending a sequence, what is gonna tie this up in a nice bow? Now you might not use this footage depending on how you do your edit, but always capturing like everything that you could use to help tell the story is gonna make your editing much easier. So there's lots of awesome techniques to shoot like this crazy handheld B-roll, but that's not always what you need to be shooting. It doesn't necessarily always work for the kind of video that you're creating. One tip when you're shooting handheld B-roll though, is that always add like a little bit of motion to the video. It's gonna just make it that much better. So when I'm shooting B-roll, especially slow motion, and I'm just hand holding it like this, I'll put a little sway. You'll see me bobbing from side to side. And I just kind of go back and forth depending on what I'm shooting. You'll realize when you get into the edit that having this little bit of motion adds so much to the footage. One tip is just break the rules. You don't have to put yourself in like this box of what is cinematic B-roll. Like you don't have to shoot shallow depth of field. You don't have to shoot 120 frames per second. Get creative and just experiment. You'll end up finding different techniques that you like, and that will help craft what your style is, rather than just being a copy of 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 a copy. One huge tip is to hold your shots longer than you think. So when I was in Thailand with Levi, we were just shooting some behind the scenes at some of the temples. And there's this moment, you can see right here, I'm filming Levi with the moped coming out of the temple gates. And then right here I cut. What you don't see is that Levi actually crashed his scooter right here and it went under a car. Now he's completely fine, but I cut the camera too early so I missed the entire shot. So when you're out shooting, just make sure you're not doing like dun dun, dun dun, dun dun. Like hold the shots for longer. And it doesn't matter if you get this extra footage, it's not going to kill you unless you're shooting like crazy raw format where it's eating up terabytes and terabytes of hard drives. Hold your shots a little longer and you end up getting B-roll that you will use in the edit. Now this next tip is something that I actually need to remind myself because it's something that I am constantly forgetting, but grab time lapses. It's super easy to set your camera down, especially if you bring a small lightweight tripod with you, and grab a time lapse. It's gonna help you show the passage of time and it adds another level to your videos. And when I actually remember to do this, I end up using these time lapses and they're really helpful in the edit. So put your camera down once in a while, grab a coffee, chill, enjoy the scenery, and just grab those time lapses. So there's tons of videos coming out on how to shoot better B-roll and epic B-roll and this and that. And all of these techniques are great. I mean, all these creators are doing really cool things, but one thing I want you to focus on is only trying to tackle one of these ideas at a time. If you're trying to do too much at once, you end up not really perfecting anything. So if you really want to focus in on getting like this style of shot, focus on it for a little bit and don't try to jump to the next technique. And over time, you'll develop your skills, you'll figure out what you like using, and you'll have your toolkit of different techniques and styles that you can use to create your videos. The best camera is the one that's in your hands. So if your gear is packed away or it's just somewhere not close and all you have is your phone, then use it. Don't be afraid to use just any camera that you have at your disposal to capture the shot, because it's more important that you get the shot than it is to have like the best camera with the best lens and all of that. All the time when I'm out shooting, I'll pull my phone out just to grab quick B-roll shots and they end up working really well. You just have to make sure that you're using the same kind of techniques that you use with your bigger camera to capture B-roll with your phone. Let's talk about this term continuity for a second. So when you're shooting, if you're shooting across like multiple days or you're shooting across multiple locations, like things like someone's t-shirt or the hat that they're wearing, you need to make sure that they match so that when you get in the edit, you're not like, oh, this looks like I'm jumping from all these different scenes. You always have to be thinking of your edit when you're out shooting, and that's gonna make you a better shooter. And one of the biggest tips is just have fun with the content that you're creating. Don't get too hard on yourself if you don't nail that B-roll shot. Just keep trying new things and experimenting, and you'll find new ways to do stuff that really fits what you want to create as a creator. If you haven't already seen my video on why YouTube gave me $20,000 to create anything that I wanted, I'll put a link right here so you can check it out. A lot of the B-roll that you've seen in this video has come from that whole series that I'm working on. And there's some pretty cool stuff on the horizon. So guys, that is it. I'll see you on the next one.